Up till now, the work that we've done on colour has relied upon us making selections and colouring things in. Now, that's not always easy. If you have a look at this artwork here, I have very few closed shapes. And if I go to view the transparency grid, you'll see it's completely transparent in the background. We don't really have any full colours. So in this situation, there's something called the Live Paint feature, which is absolutely fantastic for colouring artwork. And that's what we're going to have a look at here. So if you want to follow along, open livepaintstart.ai, and I'm just going to deselect everything. And I have this character that I've drawn using the pens and the tools in Illustrator. And the way that I've done it is just by drawing line work, like drawing individual lines. So I haven't created very many closed groups. And normally that would create a problem. So I would have to maybe create a compound shape from these closed groups and then use that to make selections and create colour. That's the old way of working. But the new way of working is to use a tool that does that automatically for you called Live Paint. So you'll notice that I've split things into individual elements. We're going to turn off our hair for now and just work on this layer, the body layer, which has all my artwork on it. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to convert that to a Live Paint group. So you'll notice I've got my navigator open as well. I quite find that handy. I've selected the painting workspace, so let's reset that so you can see it as it is as a standard setup. And then I've opened up my navigator and I drag that out and then just place it alongside. So you see that blue highlight. That allows me to place it alongside, and I've got the info panel above that as well, so I can just close that. So it's a nice way of having a little overview of my artwork while I'm working on it. So once you have your workspace sorted out, what you want to do is select the object, and a couple of ways of creating Live Paint groups. You can either go to Object, Live Paint Make, or we can go over here, and I believe it's underneath the Shape Builder, the Live Paint Bucket tool. And the Live Paint Bucket tool allows me to click to create a Live Paint group from this item. So that's what I'm going to do. Now it's telling me that complex visual appearance attributes such as brushes, live effects, transparency and stroke alignment options may be lost when converting to Live Paint group. Now watch what happens. If I click OK, you'll notice that if I deselect that, it really has changed the appearance of my artwork. So I'm going to undo that. And there's a step that I usually do before going into Live Paint group, and that's to convert the strokes to outlines. And by converting the strokes to outlines, instead of having single paths with artwork applied determining the artwork, we encompass the artwork with a path. Makes it more precise when scaling artwork up or down, but also when using Live Paint. So to do that, we select the artwork and then go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke. And you'll notice when I do that, if we zoom in on an area like this, you'll notice if I undo that and redo that, it goes from a single path with artwork applied. And if we go to outline mode, we can see that that's how the image is drawn. And if we zoom out again, you can see now it's all outlines. And then we go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke. And that's going to take our artwork and create strokes on each side of each path. So it makes the artwork a lot more detailed, if you like, because every single stroke, every single line, rather, in our line work has a path on either side of it. But it just makes it much more precise in terms of handing this artwork off to someone else or just scaling things up and down. The other nice thing switching into outline mode for a split second is I notice stray anchor points as well. So I'm just going to delete that while I'm in there. Drag a selection around there and delete that stray anchor point. So this is how it looks in outline mode. Let's go back to preview mode. And now we want to start colouring our artwork. So I'm going to select the artwork. Now it has got a hell of a lot of points on it. If we zoom in, you'll notice there's a lot of detail in there. There are tools to help you simplify artwork, and it's worth experimenting with them. You can go into the Object menu, into Path, Simplify. Now, I don't recommend using the default settings because watch what happens. Okay, she looks a bit weird. But you can go in there and you can adjust the curve precision and the angle threshold. And you can end up removing quite a few points, but still keeping your artwork fairly true to its original kind of quality. So if I take the angle threshold down to about 20 and the curve precision up to quite a high value, it's quite amazing how many points I can actually remove. So you'll notice I've gone from 13,715 points to only 3,024 points. So quite a good change, really, in terms of numbers of points. But you have to look at the artwork and make a decision about whether you think that's acceptable. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to say OK and come out. And then now choose my live paint bucket tool. And when I click on the artwork, it now becomes a live paint group. Now it's just reminding me that complex visual appearances, such as brushes, live effects, transparency, and stroke alignment options may be lost when converting to live paint group. We've already fixed that, so we can say don't show again and click OK. And we now have a live paint group ready for painting. And you'll notice as I hover over it, it selects various different parts of my figure. Now I don't need to have a selection on, I can deselect that and just hover over and see how it's working. It's working pretty well actually. What we're going to do is close up our swatches, colour guide, brushes and layers by clicking on the tabs so that I've got a nice big colour picker. And what we're going to do is first of all select the colour we want to start with. And this is how you work with live paint. Instead of selecting something and then colouring it, you select your colour first, or this is how I use it anyway. So I select my colour, then with it selected, I hover over this arm, and notice even though that arm consists of lots of different strokes and no closed shapes, Illustrator has closed the shape for me, and it's easy now to just click on that arm and colour it. I just love this feature. Let's colour the thigh the same colour, and let's colour this part of the thigh. Now there's a slight error here. You'll notice that the thigh is actually joined to the boot. And if we undo that and have a look, you'll notice there's actually a gap. I can just point out a gap there between these 2 points. So there's a gap here and it recognises that gap, and that's why it's trying to fill the space between these shapes. So I'm going to undo live paint for that section, and what I'm going to do is select the live paint group. And when I select the live paint group, I get options up here for live paint. And if I have a look at this one and click on this, I get access to my gap options. Now I've asked it to stop the paint at large gaps, which means it will look for large gaps and it will stop the paint at those points. Now you may see little red dots. That's showing me where live paint is filling gaps basically. And I can change the colour. Let's change it to blue. Change it to yellow, and you can see that they're being highlighted in these different colours. Now it's found 68 gaps and it's closed those. Now I could try making the threshold a bit higher, so I could say let's try custom gaps, and I could go up and make the gaps bigger and bigger and see if it will close this artwork. But even at a value of say 10, which I think is the maximum value for closing gaps, let's see if it works. Actually, yeah, that works, so that's enough. Now you'll notice it's closing some gaps I don't want it to close though. So let's just try going down. Now when you have preview on, it's going to take a little bit of time to work out those settings. And it figures that a value of 9 is enough to close this gap, but it's leaving that gap open, so I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to click on OK. And now when I select the paint bucket tool, and hover over this area, I can paint the thigh without painting the boot. And I can go through and start painting elements again. Again, I can deselect in order to use live paint. I don't need to have it selected. So we'll do the neck, the face. Whoops. Sometimes it's quite hard to get it exactly in the right place. But basically use the black arrow to determine where you're colouring. And we can zoom in again, use my navigator, just to colour these areas here. Okay, once I've done that, I may then select another colour. And there's lots of different ways of selecting colours. I could sample a colour from somewhere else in the artwork if I wanted to. But I'm just going to use the colour picker. And I'm going to choose a bright red colour for her top half. And let's just colour that little bit in there. And we're also going to colour every second line with that same red on this outfit here. Now we've got big gaps here. I might leave those for now and come back to them later. And then we're also going to select a nice blue colour for her pants. So we could continue selecting colours and painting our artwork, but I'm just going to show you another couple of tips before I do that. And if you go into your swatches, notice we don't have any swatches saved, but if I start saving some of the colour swatches, so if we take the colour from the red top, drag that into the swatches panel, again using the paint bucket tool I can select the colour from her pants and drag that into there, and we'll also hold down Alt and select the colour from her skin and drag that in there. Now the good thing about doing that is once you have swatches in the swatches panel, you'll notice that I can cycle between different swatches. There's a little swatch indicator just above my paint bucket tool, and I can use the right and left arrow keys to cycle through the last 3 colour swatches used. So if I wanted to do her boots blue, I can just click on the blue without having to go back and select it from another spot. And again, I can move down here and do this boot blue. If I added black to there, so if I had a black swatch, let's just select black for a second and add that in there. That would also become part of the selection. So I can now do the bottom of her boots black. And in fact, I'm going to do all of her boots black because they need to be black, not blue. So you get the idea. And for skin tones, again, I would move up here and just use the left and right arrow keys to toggle between the colours from my swatch groups and start painting. So you can create live paint swatch groups to help you with your painting. So I'm going to let you finish this, and you can open up the finished one, livepaint.end.ai, to have a look at it. So the only thing I wouldn't do with live paint is the hair. I'd probably use one of the drawing modes to paint behind the artwork, and the easiest way to do that, you just click on this button here, draw behind, and I'm going to double click my colour picker, choose a brown colour. And now when I paint, now I've accidentally chosen the brown colour as my fill. It needs to be the stroke colour for the blob brush tool. So with the blob brush tool selected, I can paint, and it will paint behind my artwork. So I can very quickly paint in that hair, make my brush a little bit smaller if I need to, and just paint away in there. Obviously I may need to do some of it in front mode, so I can just switch back to front mode when I need to. So I'm just going to do that really roughly just so you get an idea of how painting behind works. I'm going to go back to paint in front, and then I would paint these areas here. So that's a little bit about how you can use Live Paint. As I said, open up livepaint.end.ai and you'll see the finished result, where I've also used some gradients to fill some of the areas.